And, okay. I tried, oh, okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Let's call the meeting, the Wednesday, November 5th, 2025 meeting of the Falls Church City Planning Commission to order. Mr. Trainer, can you do a roll call, please?
And I just want to remind everyone to please speak into the microphones. Mr. Duncan,
Here?
Mr. Krasner,
Here?
Chair Comont,
I'm here.
Mr. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Polinsky.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Great. And we do have one member who would like to participate remotely, Ms. Friedlander. Ms. Friedlander, can you identify your location and the reason for your participation by electronic means?
I am at home in Falls Church City, but I do have some childcare issues that I need to be here for.
Okay. Thank you for that. Is there a motion to approve her participation?
Madam Chair, I move that the Planning Commission approve electronic participation by Ms. Friedlander in this meeting for family reasons pursuant to the Planning Commission's policy for remote participation in Planning Commission meetings that adopted on February 5th, 2025.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I would note her video is not clear at the moment. Maybe that'll.
Yeah, you're a little pixelated,
Straighten out.
Sharon.
We hear you just fine.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part, I guess, but.
You kind of look like a Van Gogh painting.
Yeah, it's kind of,
It might just be better to turn your camera off until maybe try again later. I don't know, because. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
yes.
and we hear you.
We
We hear you loud and clear. It's just the video is off.
that is some kind of look with that pixelated video.
Oh, yeah. So no speaker series tonight. Do we have any speakers tonight, Mr. Trainer? Thinking no.
No, I just think we need to adopt the agenda.
Oh, thank you for that. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, no speaker series. Mr. Trainer, is there anybody here to speak to the commission tonight?
No, Madam Chair, I've not received any speaker slips to address the commission tonight. Regarding written petitions, the commission did receive one from Paul Flush, 206 Southwest Street, wrote to the commission with concerns about on-street parking on Southwest Street.
Okay, great. Let's see. On action items. Did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes from our last meeting, October 15th? Any edits?
I have none.
I move to adopt the minutes of the meeting of October 15th, 2025 as presented.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Abstention. Ms. Friedlander.
Ms. Friedlander was absent, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that went pretty quickly. So that brings us to our work session items. I know we have one member of the Urban Forestry Commission here. Hello. I'm Andrea. I'm Kathleen Norman. Kathleen, nice to meet you. Okay. Do we need to wait for a quorum for the Urban Forestry Commission, or what's the sort of procedure?
No, due to unforeseen circumstances, we won't have quorum with the Urban Forestry Commission tonight, so this is kind of a,
Okay,
more of a,
okay.
we're just here in spirit.
Great, thank you for being here. So I guess, who's introducing the item? Great, Mr. Matusek.
Hi, good evening, everyone. We wanted to continue a conversation that started earlier this year, I believe in March, with the City Council, but has since gone on to involve additional analysis, research, internal conversations that I think speak to a much bigger volume of work that, at least through the end of this year, will help identify some near-term objectives, but also set the stage for additional work to come next year as we kind of continue to prioritize tree canopy for the city. So what I wanted to do is kind of continue the conversation that we most recently had with the council, I believe in October or September of this year, and set the stage for a return to this group in late November, where we can have some additional conversations with recommendations and additional analysis, which is being finalized as we speak. So with that, I wanted to hand things over to Charles Prince, Kurt Lawrence, and Cameron Gaines, who have been working collectively across both departments to compile this information, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Chair Comment, Vice Chair Stevens, and the Planning Commission. Happy to be here tonight. I'm Charles Prince, the City Arborist. This is Kurt Lawrence, Environmental Planner. Tonight, Kurt and I are going to show some tree canopy data we've compiled, and Kurt's going to kick us off.
Okay. Let's get the presentation up for us, and we'll jump right in. Okay.
Should switch.
Okay. Go back one to the benefits. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start with the benefits of urban trees. I'm sure everyone might be familiar with a few of these, but we think it's a great starting point for us. So not only are they a great aesthetic piece of any city or community, but they have a number of benefits, including filtering the city's air, cooling city streets, reducing rates of cardiac disease, strokes, and asthma due to improved air quality, protecting biodiversity and increasing habitat, reducing obesity levels by increasing physical activity, including walking and cycling, managing stormwater, increasing neighborhood property values, and reducing stress by helping interrupt thoughtful patterns that lead to anxiety and depression, sort of the biophilia aspect. Another fun fact is that according to a Texas A&M Forest Service study, trees can actually be a stimulus to economic development, attracting new businesses and tourism. Treed commercial retail areas are more attractive to shop in, and in fact, retail rates were 7% higher for properties having a quality landscape versus comparable properties lacking that value. And additionally, shoppers are willing to pay about 10% higher prices for products in a shopping area with those trees compared to areas without them. Okay, moving right along. We'll talk about how we got here. So for some time, the Urban Forestry Commission has identified a lack of tree canopy requirements, kind of leading to tricky conversations during the development process regarding our tree canopy in the city. So during reviews with no requirement to fall back on, the Urban Forestry Commission and other folks in the city found that there was really no firm way for the city to require trees during the development process. And so with no minimums, the ask was for more tree canopy requirements in the city. And as well as the Urban Forestry Commission, the City Council included tree canopy in its 2024-2025 strategic priorities for environmental sustainability. So with that, we've noted that the Code of Virginia permits tree canopy minimums of 10% in commercial areas. And then, since then, more recently on October 6, 2025, we had a very similar conversation with the City Council. And then since then, we had an initiating resolution passed by the City Council on the 27th, just a couple weeks ago. And then since that initiating resolution and the first work session in October, staff has continued to assess tree canopy data, and we're working towards finalizing how the future is going to look for this tree canopy in Falls Church. Okay. Let's see here. Try to click on your screen there. And then I do want to be clear that the area we're looking at tonight are the commercial areas where this 10% maximum might apply, or minimum might apply. So you see on the map there, kind of those inner areas of the city along the major roads are going to be the major focus area for this evening's discussion. Okay. So with that, I'd like to get into the current regulations for non-residential zoning districts. So there is not currently a tree canopy minimum, but there are certain rules that come into play during the development process. So for example, interior parking lot plantings are required for lots exceeding 3,420 square feet So in that instance, 5% of the square footage of commercial surface parking area must be dedicated to interior planting or vegetation. And then on the perimeter of parking lots, 4 canopy trees are required every 100 feet of that parking lot perimeter, where the parking lot is adjacent to either a public street or an abutting property. And lastly, we have the buffer planting between zoning districts. So 4 canopy trees every 100 feet of buffers on lots zoned RC, RTH, RM, OD, T1, T2, B1, B2, B3, and M1, when those lots are adjacent to any R zoning districts. Okay. So what does that look like in practice? So rather than dive into a slew of site plans and try to figure out how the landscaping plans apply to in real life, what we did is kind of break down site plans by the steps by which they kind of accrue trees on their property. So as you'll see on the screen in front of you, you've got a table to the left that kind of describes the tree type, canopy coverage, in square feet, and then that correlates to a number of squares on the right side of the screen, which is a sample diagram, which is really just taking more of a complex site plan and turning it into a simple 10 by 10 square, where each of the squares within that grid represent a certain area. So for this specific example, we will look at 2 tonight. This is the Harris Teeter site at 301 West Broad Street. So if you can imagine, that site is about 110,000 square feet. So each of those squares inside the diagram on the right side of the screen are about 1,100 square feet. So as we go through this exercise, you'll see the screen populate with the type of tree. So the perimeter parking lot trees for this example yielded 0 square feet of tree canopy coverage because there is no surface parking lot at this site. The same is true for interior parking lot requirements. But for the buffers, we did get a good amount of tree canopy coverage using that requirement. There's a residential zone to the left of this diagram in this scenario, and there you had a good grouping of trees that are represented by the colored squares. Yeah. Yes, that's correct. And so these are sort of oriented to how we get them at the site plan. So if you've ever looked at the site plan for this one or the next one, it's sort of that same orientation, just kind of simplified down into a square. So moving along after the buffer trees, the street tree requirements yielded almost 2,700 square feet of trees, which is represented by the other squares there. No other trees were planted there, so we ended up with a total of a little over 15,000 square feet of tree canopy coverage, or in other words, 13% of the site. Okay.
That's according to the site plan?
Yes, so the landscaping plan. So that's a good note. These diagrams were derived from the landscaping plan in the site plan, which uses the, one of the attachments is the Chesapeake Bay tree canopy worksheet, which assumes certain square footage coverages for different kinds of trees based on their size. So for example, different types of trees at 20 years maturity might be 200 square feet or 315, and you can use the landscaping plan that'll tell you exactly what trees are being planted compared to that sheet, and then get a total amount of tree canopy coverage for that area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine. Where I was headed, I'm just curious whether we actually enforce the site plans? I don't, maybe on some periodic basis or on a sample basis, just to go back and look and see if the trees that were supposed to be installed as part of a site plan are actually there, or, over the years, of course, trees die and so forth. So,
Yeah, I'll take that question. Yeah, site plans are held within perpetuity, right? So they have to keep their site plan.
Right.
So it's kind of a report basis, or if I'm walking down the street and I notice something, I'll work with each property to get them back in compliance. If I have to get zoning involved, that happens, but yeah, they're required to keep it.
So it's possible that, some sites may not be, fully consistent with what their site plans required. trees died and just weren't replaced. I know I look out onto this place where the gym is that I go to, and I could see they get trees that have died, and they haven't replaced them. I mean, maybe they plan to, I don't know. But I'm just curious, that there might be an opportunity there for the city if there was kind of a better enforcement, that perhaps that could fill in a few gaps.
Sure, yeah, and if you do see any properties not meeting their site plan, definitely give me an email and I'll look into it, absolutely.
Right, and I know you're by yourself, so it's kind of hard to,
Yeah,
but I was just kind of curious whether the city has any capacity to take a look on a sample basis, perhaps at site plans to see how well we're doing, so. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Well, and to your point, it's important to note that these landscape plans provide the canopy at 20 years maturity for these trees. So it's possible that within that first 20 years, the tree canopy might not be representative of what's in the plan and what's projected. Okay. So moving along to another site here. So this similar diagram for Madera Falls Church. So if you can imagine, it's kind of a 90,000 square foot site. So each of those squares in that diagram would be about 900 square feet. We'll go through the same exercise again. So again, in this property, there is no surface parking lot, so we did not trigger the requirements as listed in the zoning ordinance for perimeter parking lots. Interior is the same way. And then the buffer here is much smaller, and it only yielded 1,400 square feet of tree canopy coverage for this site. Street trees added another about 5,400 square feet of tree canopy coverage. We did have a few other trees planted in sort of the kind of pedestrian area off of the street, which added about 1,200 square feet of tree canopy, which brought us to a total of about 15,000 square feet of tree canopy coverage for this site, which is only 8% tree canopy coverage. Okay, I'll pass to Charles.
thanks, Kurt. As you know, as we all know, there are many challenges to urban forests. One of them is land development, but there's many others, including invasive species such as the spotted lanternfly is our newest one. Minimal root areas with small streetscape planters or reduced size streetscape planters opposed to where they naturally grow. The heat island effect, and there's many others. So this is a typical SE. There's a small buffer planting in the lower right next to the single-family home, but you can see the significant tree loss from this project when you compare the left to the right. And of course, the idea of these is to get as much building square footage as possible, but I think we can mix the two.
There's Teeter.
No, oops.
Is that Broad in Washington?
No, yeah, this is Northgate.
Oh, North.
Oh, Northgate. Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Thank you. So next, just a typical minor site plan. So this was not special exception, but you can see the significant tree loss, mature tree loss, especially along the perimeters on this project, and it just shows kind of the difference in the tree canopies. What's that? That was the new Volvo dealership. Well, the newer one. Yeah. Absolutely.
What is the calculated net loss?
We haven't gotten to the net loss numbers yet. We were just kind of, well, for before and after, that's really hard to calculate. These projects aren't required to show the existing tree canopy and then the installed tree canopy. So right now, the only data we really have, I mean, we could, draw squares around it and get the tree canopy before, but we haven't started doing that yet.
When we come back later this month, the additional analysis, there will be some citywide figures about kind of the trends we're seeing. So we won't unfortunately get down to this level of detail, but we will have some suggestions about what the
Just occurs to me that on these projects that you've shown, I wasn't here for the Northgate, but I know on the Volvo and I think Harris Teeter, was that the other one that you had up? Staff recommendation was to approve those. So I think maybe that underlies part of why you're proposing, that we move forward with this legislation, because, on one hand, we say, hey, we should do this. On the other hand, whoops, we got a problem with trees. So I think the legislation or the ordinance, updating the ordinance kind of gains some sense in that context. But not to forget that the staff recommendation was to approve those projects.
Of course, yeah, I'm not saying that these should not be approved, and the point is actually, to give me a little bit more muscle as a city arborist during my reviews, like, no, we need to see these, and really when special exception comes in, like, hey, we have a minimum, a code minimum, so when you're doing a special project, maybe give us a little bit more, but having a baseline gives me more muscle to kind of say, hey, now, like, we need to see these minimums. Yeah, that is certainly the point. All right. So here's just an example of all the completed projects, and if you look here on this left column, this is where I really want to focus. So this is the on-site trees. This is not the trees that were put in the streetscape. So this is just what is on the site, and this is what I really want to focus us on. So there's 5 projects under 10% within the property line, and I think with some small adjustments, we could have gotten, well, with some exceptions. Modera is at 3%. That would have taken a significant lift to bring that to 10. But bringing all of the properties that are under 10% up to 10 brings our average, if you see down the bottom row, the average tree canopy from 11% to 12 to 13%. So just a small change for our tree canopy minimums can make a pretty big difference.
Those figures don't show the street trees.
It does, yes.
That was the next column.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, so
It's the third
Tree
column.
canopy from street trees only.
And then there's the combined. Yeah.
Okay, so the combined averages out to be 17%.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. So the bonus is the calculation. They calculated, we're giving them a bonus because they keep native trees in terms of how we count the canopy coverage.
So the Chesapeake Bay ordinance gives a percentage for planting native trees. City policy has basically been we only plant native trees. So that's assuming that these are all going to be native trees. But yeah, I mean, if you add everything up, the last column, that is everything with the bonus and the street trees.
But I guess my question would be like, in terms of mitigating heat island effects or things like that, like the bonus doesn't really matter in that particular concept, right?
To the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance, it does, but to your point, like,
It doesn't make more trees.
it does not make more
more
trees.
coverage on the
Correct.
site. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and then that is a little frustration I have with it, since our policy is to be native only. But I believe we haven't gone all the way down the rabbit hole, but I believe we're going to we're going to have to give the bonus, fairly certain. And that's just another kind of argument to have the 10% minimums on site of the property. Because if they're already getting 25% bonus, like, let's.
Right, I was gonna say, like, if they have 5% and they get, or 7% and they have native, those are 7% all native trees, they effectively have 10%, right? I'm bad
much,
at
yeah.
math, but like,
Yeah.
effectively they're at
Yep.
the point. Okay. So, like you said, Madera, the new one, Founders Row 2, would have been a big lift to get there, but if it's all, they put 4% more native trees on there, then it gets them to the way we're calculating, like, is the question, the way that, and I read about what the city council talked about, but I'm unclear on this particular thing, is the 10% is a floor, some number as a floor in terms of trees, inclusive of the bonus that would be acquired based on having native trees?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Of course.
I think the distinction you're going to see as we conclude this stage, this phase one as we're calling it, and what we're gonna get into next year with respect to tree canopy is, right now, we're simply discussing what can be required because of state's restrictions in our code. Next year, we're gonna get into what we expect. Even if we can't say that it's required, the way it's prescribed and the way it lives in various documents, I think will set a much higher bar than 10%. So today, we can probably have a conversation about those past projects, which were much more limited in our negotiation abilities, but moving forward, I think we're trying to establish a much higher bar. And as you'll see later this month, following the mechanisms that other jurisdictions rely on beyond just their code to get to those high percentages.
Question about, so.
Brent, can you turn
Oh,
your
sorry
mic
about
on?
that, sorry. So I think now that's a change, the street tree, counting street trees or not counting street trees. So currently, forgive me because I probably should know this, but we do count street trees now. And
Well,
as part of the
we don't
tenure
count
counting-
anything. There's no requirement
Yeah.
for the special exception, so we counted street trees in here to paint the full picture.
I mean, for canopy credit now, you're saying we don't allow
There,
it?
there's no requirement, so we're not really counting any.
We don't have a canopy credit
Yeah, we don't have any canopy
At all.
homes right now, at all.
in the commercial areas?
But
Ah,
as part of
Well-
our assessment, though,
I don't
Out-
know if I knew
outs-
that.
you do.
Well, I mean, outside of the buffer,
Mm-hmm.
but the buffers aren't usually street trees. That's between
Yeah,
certain zones. And my argument for not counting street trees, like for example, Founders 1 and Founders 2, they tore down street trees and are just replacing them. So why should we give credit to them? They took down mature street trees to put up
yeah, I mean,
kind of small street trees, and it's not on the subject property.
right. No, it's a policy. I
Yeah.
totally get it. It's a policy debate in a more urbanized area that's already kind of a constrained site. You know, if we're trying to get to a certain, overall canopy kind of in the city, obviously like, we like to think site by site, but ultimately we really are more concerned with like sort of at a wider scale, how much canopy, is in a given area. I mean, ideally it'd be evenly distributed everywhere. And sometimes a constrained commercial site is, and I say constrained, meaning it's going to have, by its very nature of being a densely developed urbanized site, is not going to have the same capability to provide, the same percentage of canopy like on site all the time. It depends. It's like a push and pull. When we're pushing for certain levels of density there, that's, inevitably we may have to, look at things like counting street trees. But I agree with you. It's the devil's always in the details. It's how do you make sure those trees are going to survive, soil volumes, all that stuff, like, that, how they're planted in the street. Anyhow, so I guess I don't know if I knew that we don't, maybe I did and I forgot, that we don't have any requirement now on in our commercial areas. I thought we did, but maybe we don't. If we don't, I guess it's something to think about as a policy decision, like whether or not, if they're done properly, street trees, provide just as much canopy as, trees on private property. It's just a matter of making sure they're installed correctly and maintained, but, anyhow, and, I always, it's kind of a joke, I always bring up Fairfax, but Fairfax actually recently, looked at that like 3 or 4 years ago and actually went the other way. They used to not count street trees in urbanized areas. They always had a 10% canopy requirement. They decided to allow street trees, but again, it's subject to there's a lot of caveats to that. I mean, how it's installed, other factors. I'm not, I could point you to what they've done. It might be interesting to look at how it's worked out in the last 2 or 3 years in like more urbanized areas, like in Tysons and Reston, and and that's kind of why they did it. They were trying to be flexible, but I get it. It's like, yeah, it's kind of a policy question. We should continue to chew on it, but yeah.
I think where that's going is, and this table is actually a helpful guide in that if we get to a point next year where we're evaluating the role of street trees, particularly net new additional trees, what deserves to take credit for, if they're included in the analysis, I think the expected number, the percentage of tree canopy we would expect most sites to deliver would be higher. If street trees, for whatever reason, are not able to be counted, that percentage would probably go down in terms of our expectation. And I think this table is a good assessment of what numbers are we seeing with past approvals, with and without street trees, and how does that inform perhaps on a more aggressive approach to achieving canopy, which no doubt, I think on smaller sites, we're gonna have to have some relief because they should not be held to the same standard as an SC site, which is kind of starting from scratch and has a lot more flexibility.
Yeah. Also, I'm just kind of curious, Mr. Matuzzi, are you familiar with the concept called urban transact?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, it's an architectural thing where, you know, you kind of have your densest development in your core downtown, and then it kind of gets lighter as you extend out. And, you know, it strikes me that in your absolute densest area, you know, it's going to be 10%. It sounds reasonable, but to go much above that is going to be a challenge. But then the question arises, do you do it when, you know, in your absolute densest area, as opposed to, you know, trying to balance it out with higher canopy outside of that? I'm just curious in, you know, places like either Fairfax County or Arlington, whether they kind of deal with that nuance, so that rather than one size fits all, like, you know, all commercial has to do this, do they vary it based on where it is within the framework of density that they allow?
I've seen jurisdictions rely on street typologies and variations in the urban environment where the number ranges. And I think the less urban you are, the higher the number is.
Right.
But using that logic, I've not seen sites go below, let's say, 15% minimum, but go as high as 40% minimum. Because you have sites that already have garden-style apartments, heavy tree canopy, and they're well within the reach if you just kind of catch this early, plan for it, and work with the applicants to get there.
Yeah.
And that range allows you to get to a reasonable number. That logic aside, I think the bigger argument you're going to see us make later this year and next year is that what is the role of tree canopy for the city? And do we value that in the same way we value commercial uses, for example? Is that what the city is known for? Is that part of our brand? If we believe that tree canopy is part of what makes Falls Church the charming city that it is, then we should be prioritizing much more than we currently have. Some of that lives in commercial standards, and some of it may have to live in the residential ones. And I think with the evidence we're going to come back with, you're going to see where the current concentration of canopy is and where we're seeing the biggest losses. And I think the debate in front of us is how much of that share falls in the commercial side and how much falls in the residential. Collectively, we're trying to address both.
Is part of that calculus building out the business plan of, or the business case of how much commercial or residential space would be lost in order to have a higher percentage of tree canopy, in order to have that conversation on like we're willing to spend X number of cents on the tax rate in order to have higher tree, which is a perfectly reasonable conversation to have. I'm just curious, like, as you think about putting together that conversation, is that the way we're thinking about it, or are we thinking about it in a different way?
I think we're thinking about it how we consider competing trade-offs in terms of the role residential neighborhoods play in maintaining the city brand, the character, the kind of the destination that it has become for families, and the role that commercial properties play in the economic development driver that they've become. The earlier map, I think, showing the existing concentration of canopy is pretty compelling. It's from 2014, I believe. And you can already see at that time what the conditions were. If you look at where we are now, things certainly look a little bit more dire in terms of the loss that we've experienced in the last decade or so. So I think what we're trying to do is look ahead to the next decade and what do we want to do about that, particularly since anytime you lose canopy, it is very difficult to get it back. We're not planting forests. We not have just plain sites willing to, not develop and instead just provide canopy. Although there are examples where we've acquired sites to expand park space. But if you think about just what goes into like 1% canopy loss for the city, how many square feet is that? How many trees you would have to plant to make that up? There's an argument to be made that once it's lost, you can't get it back. So I think we're being very mindful of what are the trends we're experiencing, particularly with the development that's happened, and really the patterns we're seeing in the residential neighborhoods, and then how do we kind of reassess and recalculate what needs to happen in the commercial areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very valid point to bring up. And I think the thing that would be helpful for me is understanding, like, if we looked at Founders Row 2 and we said, we're gonna make it X% smaller so that it can fit 10% tree canopy, not without the bonus, but like 10% tree canopy, what does that site look like? And how many fewer apartments are there? How many fewer restaurants are there? Like, same with the T-zones, right? Like, we built T-zones, it's more hardscape, it's more impervious places because the buildings are bigger. How many fewer apartment or townhomes will we need there? Just because I think that gives us an apples to apples type of conversation.
Yep.
To have, like, not against what you're saying. I just think it would be easier to understand, easier for me to understand. Like,
We are mandating the max allowable for T-zones in terms of tree canopy, just FYI, 15%, right?
Yeah. And if I may add to that, so when you have a project coming in, like a developer saying, hey, we're gonna develop this land, if they know before they get to their drawing board what we expect for tree canopy, they can better design that building,
Yeah,
to fit
absolutely.
the space, yeah.
I would love nothing more for
'Cause,
Joe
like-
Muffler to, like, have said, I'm gonna put trees here on this corner than another laser spa or something like that. But, like, I think the question I have is, like, the city has also made its decision that we're gonna lower the tax rate and we're gonna do it through commercial development. I think that there is a fixed amount of space, and it's a zero-sum-ish type of game. Like, we either build more like buildings or we don't. And I think that trying to understand those questions is, like, are we willing to pay 0.01 cents more on the tax rate to have more trees? I think I would say yes, but I think that's the question I'd like to understand.
Yeah, there are a lot of competing interests, and I agree that trees are part of the city's brand. I think also as planning commissioners, we need to be thinking about, like, planning for the future, 50 years from now, where we can expect a lot more heat, right? And so how are we equipping the city to be resilient in that potentially much warmer future that we're all headed towards? And trees are a big part of that.
Ironically, I mean, I'm looking at the map. I mean, one maybe potential bright spot is, Gordon Road is almost, completely devoid. So even any requirement
Bernie
there.
Forest,
Right.
forget everything else.
Any requirement there, will be an improvement, even with a very dense urban development. So, I mean, in that sense, right. I mean, we can't lose sight of that too. But yeah, I think also it's important, right? It's like, I mean, we're concerned about, I guess, sort of the microclimate of, like, what tree canopy does in the urban area. But again, I think we have to, like, and maybe we've already done this, again, forgive me, I just, we having a citywide goal, or like breaking the city up and having like a goal for percentage of total coverage, and whether that's, going to be more, inevitably it's going to be more heavily concentrated in the residential areas where there's more room for trees. I mean, I think, as far as goal setting, I think there's some benefit to that. I mean, I think it's kind of, right, it would be, if there was a forest of trees next behind, Founders Row, and Founders Row had no trees, I mean, from a kind of an environmental perspective, it still provides a benefit. But I get it as far as, like, hotter environment and less shade. I mean, trees play a role even in a very dense development. So, but yeah, I think we need to look at it carefully because, as Mr. Polinsky was saying, it's right. We have a limited area for commercial development, and it's always a balancing act. And, in those areas, we've kind of, our planning for, essentially the last number of years, and if not decades, has been to concentrate less green space there, knowing that, we're trying to have more development. So anyhow, but but there's no reason why we can't have more than we have now. Every time we have no tree canopy requirement, we certainly can have more than, have some on these urban sites. It's just a matter of how we do it. And that's also gets back to, like, all right, if there's some of it's in the right of way, maybe that's okay. Because they're still trees, they still count. The tree doesn't know if it's on public or private property. So anyhow.
And I think to staff's credit, the list of approved projects, they're simply documenting that even with simply effective negotiation, you can get to 15, 20, even 25% canopy, as several sites have been able to. So I think the proof of concept is there, where on small commercial sites and large SC projects, you can reach those levels of canopy and still have an economically viable project. That's not foregoing density or units simply to meet this objective. I think what we're trying to do is look at consistently, can we do better than that? And, you know, what are the consequences and trade-offs of doing that? And I think that's going to be some of the additional analysis ahead of us next year, since the initial phase of this, the 10%, is already kind of embedded in the products that we've been getting. So I don't think the 10% is the controversial part. It's anything above that.
I've heard you say that before, so that's helpful to continue to hear, I think. I don't have a lot to add from what has already been said, but what you just said, not foregoing density or units to advance, you know, the tree canopy, seems like that's the holy grail we're trying to reach for. And, I mean, I've been involved, I guess, in 8 or 10 of those 14, 15 items, and in every case, yeah, we didn't really have a specific number because we didn't have a number. But in every case, we always were negotiating, you know, about more units, more density, so we could do more affordable, you know, we could give more to the schools, or, you know, that conversation happens with every single development. And there are some places in town that are better suited to, I would argue, density and less tree canopy, simply because of, you know, their location right on one of the major corridors. I don't know, that's one perspective. I did want to ask a question, Charles, about what you said about the size of the trees that are taken down and how long it takes to recover from that, basically, because that is something you hear a lot of folks, oh gosh, it's so terrible to see that tree go. But if you have a, you know, half-century perspective, I mean, just look at the old postcards of Falls Church. We've planted, raised, torn down, and planted and raised and grown up at least 2 or 3 cycles since we became a town in the late 1800s. And while I understand that people here today, you know, don't necessarily think about what it's going to be like 50 years from now. In fact, there are people who have lived here 50 years and have seen that, you know. So is there something we should be doing differently in that regard? Should we require the trees that we are asking to be planted to be bigger? I mean, there's money involved in that, there's logistics involved in that, but that could be part of the negotiations if you want trees that don't take 20 years to get to be significant. I guess I would like, not tonight, but I would like to get some perspective from the arborist experts on what's involved, because, you know, I understand that the trees that get planted in most of these new developments are pretty modest looking. But, you know, they're like the tree that I just cut down at my dad's house, you know, which was planted 60 years ago and was tall as I was back then, and over those 60 years became this massive oak tree, which finally had to be taken down because it was falling on the house. And that's a success story. You know, I did my job during my time here to let that tree get from a sapling to a towering tree, and now it's all got to start over again. And that's basically what position we're in too. All right, thank you.
All right, I just have a couple more slides here to show. Yeah, single-family homes aren't immune to development. You know, I know I went through a lot of commercial, but it's where we really found the gap. But I just want to give some examples of single-family homes and the challenges we face there as well. So here you can see this was one lot that was subdivided into 4 homes here, and that was a really big change.
It's on East Broad Street.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
Durlin?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But we're continuing to evaluate the impact of residential development. That's going to be part of our next evaluation, our next phase of analysis is how well are we doing on residential? But we just found this big gap in the commercial side that we're not basically having any requirements, and it's been a challenge over the years to kind of get leverage, because when the developer comes and they already have their footprint in the building, it's really hard to change that footprint. But so I just want to give you a conclusion. We're going to recommend 10% canopy coverage in the city code for on-site trees within the zoning districts that don't have any minimums. That's kind of where we're at the moment. And I'm happy to answer any more additional questions that you may have, or
We had a lot of discussion already. Yeah, thank you for humoring us. Sorry to interrupt your presentation.
no, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a lot of big questions, I think, related to.
Can I ask, can I ask one question before we leave the last screen? Back to the residential.
Yeah, could you go back one?
I understand what you're saying, obviously, that we got nothing, and so let's get something for commercial. But, you know, the public's perception of developments in their neighborhoods that do take down, you know, the whole lot of everything does seem like a driving force behind the anxiety of the loss of tree canopy. And it would be helpful, I think, for everybody to know what we're allowed to do legally on private property, what we might aspirationally ask the legislature to give us more authority to expand, if that was possible, particularly in the new political climate in Richmond, sooner rather than later, because, you know, the political climate can change. And I would encourage us, because you do hear so many people talk about, you know, oh gosh, the beautiful tree that was next to that little house that got torn down, why did the whole thing have to go? And there's reasons. Some are rooted in law and some are just rooted in economics. But I would encourage us to have a conversation that includes that. If you can give us anything just in the way of a guidance as a starter on what council might do about residential. And to close that thought out, education about, you know, your trees and the health of them. I mean, not to pick on my neighbors, but, you know, when they moved in and expanded the little house that was like behind next door, first thing he did was cut down all the trees. And, you know, they looked okay to me. I had to rake the leaves every fall, but, you know, they're beautiful trees. But their preference as an owner was, you know, I don't know, they were concerned about tree limbs falling or whatever. And there wasn't really any recourse that I had. I couldn't go point to something and say, no, that tree's okay, or go talk to somebody and get a opinion about whether that tree's got another 20 years left in it before it's going to start needing to be taken down at the end of its natural life. If we could provide that sort of information somehow, that might mitigate some of the tree takedown that happens almost automatically now with any kind of residential development on any size lot.
Yeah, residential lots are very challenging. I deal with those on a daily basis. I do provide anybody that calls me any information I possibly can guide them to without overstepping my legal bounds, of course. But, yeah.
I want to make sure you have a chance to weigh in, Ms. Norman. And Ms. Friedlander is online, but yeah, please.
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Sharon, did you have any comments? I don't want to forget about you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry, I put one of it. But no, I did have a quick question. I'm assuming that in your calculations, you're including like the amenity areas that are like the internalized courtyards. Do those things count for that tree canopy, or are you just looking at what's in the public right of way?
No, we are including everything within the site, even if it's on an above-ground courtyard, if it meets minimum soil volumes, it's anything, any tree on the property.
Good, good. That's what I was hoping you would say. I do have another question there too. I have noticed that of course, it's very cheap, or it's cheaper for development or developers to like the younger trees. Sometimes they don't survive, right? If we do have an avenue to request a certain maturity or caliber trees, I would be on board with that. I think that was Mr. Duncan's comment I'd like to echo. I think that will kind of help reestablish tree canopy a little bit quicker. But my other question too is really kind of going around like where we have development that it's really challenged, the developers are really challenged to get 10%, you know, more than 10%. But are there other trade-offs or the heat island effect that would be considered appropriate, right? Or if we're going to consider more than 10%, I don't know if we can do that. I don't think we can do that because I think we have to follow with the state mandates and because we say, that was my question was, really, are there other opportunities for reduction of heat island effects in the construction type, in the roof type, in the paving type, things like that, that will alleviate kind of heat island? It still won't give us the shade and the, ambiance of, mature trees, but I was curious what kind of thoughts were, being put forth in that regard.
So that hasn't really been addressed here, kind of other means of specifically heat island effect. We've been looking at trees pretty holistically as a combination of, you mentioned shade, but also water retention, air filtration, human benefits on top of that. So something like urban heat island effect might play into some of the sort of green building aspects we get out of special exception projects. For example, we have some green roofs on some recent projects that help alleviate urban heat island effect. But this focus has been trees, and the state law that we've been looking at here specifically doesn't have any kind of trade-offs for urban heat island or any of the other sort of benefits. Like it doesn't, like, shade structures, it doesn't say, that's a good substitute either. But it's a great point because I would agree that if we can maximize, urban heat island sort of benefits in the city, I think that would go a long way for kind of getting to what we've been talking about tonight, which is the perfect kind of combination of all the benefits of trees and then everything you get out of a fully developed site.
Agreed, no, I'm all for the 10% minimum. I was just being devil's advocate. Just to kind of understand what the thought process was in that. So, no, I appreciate that. I'm definitely all in for 10%, but I would definitely consider maybe if we could request more mature trees at the beginning of the project or at substantial completion.
I have a question about that actually, because I thought I just saw something in some city communication about how we were planting younger trees because they establish their roots better. So what is the best practice in terms of the maturity of the tree?
That is a great question that I could talk to you all night about, but I will try to keep it brief. So for some of these larger projects, we are requiring 3-inch caliper trees, and those are planted with machines. They probably weigh every bit of 1,000 pounds. So if you talk to an arborist, those trees are going to take longer to establish. But once they get established, they're already a lot bigger. Now, when we go to plant trees, let's say like a couple of years ago, I went and planted 750 saplings in the forest. Right, those take. We basically put a hole in the ground, stuck a tree in it, closed it up, threw some water on it. That's it. That's all you have to do. For a big tree like that, you're going to water that most of them are in a streetscape with irrigation, but those need constant care and watering to make sure that they're getting enough water. But once they get established, they're usually pretty good. So there's a trade-off. The bigger the tree, the more care you need initially.
But the faster you get to the canopy coverage that you're seeking.
When you say needs more care, do you have a rough timeline for how much is more care?
I'll just speak from my experience. I haven't really planted trees that big, but in the past, during the Neighborhood Tree Program, we planted 1.5 to 2 inch caliper trees. We watered them for 2 years after, just to make sure they got established. Now, if I were planting 3 to 4 inch trees, actually, I did that in one project, and didn't work out for a number of different reasons than water, but we plan on watering them for 3 to 4 years.
So I know the ones that we planted on Hillwood initially with near the multimodal plaza, those initially failed and had to be replanted, but I think there was some other reason for that. It wasn't like a water thing, it was something that nursery sent us a bad batch of trees or something like that, is that right?
I don't recall the exact
remember.
reason, but yeah, there was
Okay.
some extenuating
They were,
circumstances.
they were definitely larger.
Yeah.
I know I have other questions, but I want to give everybody else a
Uh,
chance.
Just one other question. I noticed that Founder's Row, the on-site canopy excluding street trees was 5%. That site obviously had a very large underground parking garage, which I'm sure played into the reason why it's only 5% or so. As you go through your analysis, would you be working with, I don't know, maybe a developer or architect or somebody to say, now, is it possible to have rearranged or redesigned that project to get at least the 10% or maybe even higher? I'm just kind of wondering how we deal with a site like that has such a large underground parking garage.
I mean, I don't think we'll be able to go to that extent for a number of reasons, but kind of coming back like I commented before, if they know what they're expected before they start drawing their plan, putting their building footprint, they're going to know, it's like, okay, we need at least, 6 feet of soil here, so do we go a little bit deeper? Do we, how do we do that? I think that's going to be on the designers and architects to figure out, but I do think it's possible. If this was for a single family, I did ask the builder, they came to me and said, hey, this neighbor's really upset, I'm possibly going to kill their tree, like, can you give me some advice? I was like, oh yeah, well, can you move the house 10 feet back and move the driveway to this side? And they just right there on that phone call said, oh yeah, we can do that, no problem. So I really want the folks coming in to find the ways to do it, right? Because the people coming in here building these large buildings, they're real smart folks, right? Like, let's not pretend they're not. So I think just having a expectation set forward, it's just going to make a better product, I think, in the end.
I say the 10% is, I don't think should be considered a heavy lift.
Yeah.
Where we go beyond that is maybe a more complicated discussion, but
Well, and for Founders One, most of that's a buffer. So yeah, along the St. James property there. So they were required to put that in, right? Like, they're not complaining or saying, oh my gosh, the financials aren't going to work out because we need to put this buffer in.
Right.
Because that's an expectation set up from the beginning.
thanks.
Can I add something too there? So Founder's Row was an example where it was only 5%, right in that far left column that we looked at earlier. So on-site tree canopy excluding street trees. There were some others in there that went above 10%, like Quinn was at 17%, Broad and Washington at 16%.
Could you share that again,
Yeah,
the
can we do-
table? It's just helpful, it's a good chart, thank you.
And then Pearson Square, 13%, with a bunch of others kind of hovering around 10. So it's certainly possible, and I usually, from this exercise and also just existing in the city, it's usually in those buffer areas in between, the development and then usually a residential zone. There's a photo here on the slide. Charles, if you go to that slide there with the Broad and Washington project there. Yeah, right there. So if you see there, that picture on the right is from behind the Broad and Washington building, which has no surface parking, but the buffer requirements kicked in to have that massive kind of buffer zone, which ended up being a really beautiful and kind of well-designed amenity.
Right.
And then if you do go to the chart at the bottom with the other ones. This one? Mm-hmm. There's that back up. So it was it's true that Founders was only at 5%, but I think with all those other projects proving that you can go even further above 10%, I think it would be feasible on almost all of the special exception lots to get to that number. And the other thing that I'll point out is something that came up at the city council meeting. There was a question about the 10% minimum, and it kind of came to a good point that it's really to cover gaps in the development kind of environment we live in, right? So all of those other projects that are getting your 17, your 16% will still get those because the buffer requirements or just because it's good development. This will really just pick up the ones that are below that 10% and address those gaps.
Just one other, more of like, again, another comment is like the other sort of valve that you're playing with on these things is the bonuses too, right? I mean, whether or not, because in our code currently, and that's common everywhere, is, you know, you can get, it's 10%, but some trees, you know, get a bonus if they meet certain criteria, if they're, and you know, that's, again, that's something I believe that the city has, I don't know how much the state code limits us in that or not, but the ability to, how much we give or don't give a bonus to get to the 10% is the other way too, that we kind of, you know, you kind of play with it to get more, you know, so, and I think you meant, I think the report alludes to that a little bit in there, but, you know, I don't know if you've gotten to that point yet too, where you know, we developed like a policy on how much we would allow commercial sites to utilize some of those bonuses. Have you thought about that yet? You probably have thought about it. I mean, is it?
Well, so
that
this phase is really just data gathering,
Yeah.
and we're trying to get feedback to see kind of what rabbit holes we need to chase and what
Yeah.
leads and things like that. I mean, we've certainly considered a lot of different things just through conversation, but nothing real solid at this point.
Okay. Yeah, obviously that's, you know, you're familiar with that, so that's something that, you know, as you're developing it further,
Yeah.
is a way also to sort of like, you know, get it to work and be more feasible. Because obviously if you find, you know, if we make the restrictions, you know, we all love trees, but if we put the restrictions at something at a point where they couldn't really meet it, everyone would be coming and asking for waivers and modifications, that's also not what we want. And the bonuses, you know, if you're too lenient, you know, you wind up getting a lot less, fewer trees, you know, in total. So it's like again, it's a give and take, but something that probably needs to be part of it. I know landscape architects and engineers are really good at playing the game and finding a way to meet it with the bonuses, and you got your review of the plans, you know. But so yeah, so it's important that we craft it in a way that, you know, sort of acknowledges that and allows some ability to be creative and get credit for something that deserves it, but not, you know, but still, you know, make sure we're getting what we expect, but not without being too strict as well, because the sites need flexibility. These urban sites just need it in order to, I think, still be able to be developed the way we want it per the other goals the city has.
Just to add to that, part of the challenge in kind of retroactively assessing the impact of where we want to go, where we would like to end up in terms of tree canopy, to previously approved project is that the fact that we were asking, or we could not ask, or expect, or require a certain percentage from the very beginning when these applicants come in, maybe have a conceptual idea, more refined application and the, you know, finalized plans, is that they were never, in most cases, forced to, I think, push the envelope in terms of creativity and what's really feasible. So what we're looking at is really the best we could do absent of a requirement. And if we actually have targets and goals where we like to end up, part of what will have to happen is that we're not asking for those numbers, we're asking for something more aggressive, knowing that some flexibility would actually have to be embedded in that as we work with applicants' teams in good faith, I would say, to make sure that when necessary and earned, that flexibility can be provided. But I cannot see any scenario where we would accept some or support something below 10%. Some of these sites are so challenging, and with bonuses, with street trees, they've documented that it's usually possible. So I struggle to imagine the hardship on any property not to get to 10%. And there may be a time where we may also have a conversation about parking. Some of these lots that require surface parking to meet minimums that they may not even need because the market actually calls for a lower number. We're utilizing spaces that we're forcing applicants to deliver in lieu of street trees or other on-site trees that could have easily exceeded this, you know, minimum. So that might be some give and go in terms of where we have modifications and waivers. Do we absolutely need all that parking where maybe even 3 or 4 spaces could give us 2 trees?
Well, the other variable is height too. We saw that on Quinn's. And one of the reasons we got such a high percentage of trees is because
They could build it higher.
they left a lot of open land, which is what the city wanted, but in exchange for that, they had to have a taller building. So,
Yeah, I guess
And just to, real quick, just to clarify, it's 10%, you referred to 10% counting, I think, street trees and on-site, but the recommendation from staff is 10% on-site. Is that
On-site,
right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and if I repeat it back, what you were saying, it's effectively that Madera could have hit 10% if they'd known that was a requirement at the beginning when they brought it, but then they bring their initial idea, and now we're asking them to change it to add trees, and that becomes a whole different type of conversation than, I know I gotta have 10% in here.
Good landscape designers, I think, can actually push the envelope much further. Founders Row, I mean, the planter boxes on their own, I think, limit what type of size trees you can put in there. So internal to the site, that was a strategic decision which may have solved some issues, but prevented additional canopy from even being possible because those trees can only grow so big. You can't plant a mature tree in a planter box that small. So that decision alone already reduced the potential for that site, which is where we ended up with 5%.
Yeah.
Sorry, I also, Sharon had her hand up
Oh,
a while ago. It went down, but I don't know
Karen,
if
do
she.
you have a comment or a question?
Thank you, I
Okay.
We keep talking, we'll solve it.
Danny, do you have any other comments? Okay, I have a few questions, if you'll humor me. So one thing, we're looking at this table, which I think is really helpful. One thing that struck me is that like, these are all different size sites. And so that 3% number for the Modera project has like a bigger impact for the city because it's a larger site, right? And so I don't know if there's a way to like think about that. As you're pulling these numbers, it's like, I'm glad that we're sort of averaging out these percentages, but also sort of like, what is the actual physical space that we are either gaining or losing, I think is something to consider. A couple other questions. I think you are recommending that we apply the 10% requirement to the OD district, and I was curious about that because that's right where we're sitting. I'm kind of wondering, should we be making an example of requiring a higher percent in OD? I know there are other areas that are also OD, but the official design district is primarily City Hall, right, and the City Hall
Falls
campus.
Church, right?
And the Falls Church. And so can we be aiming, or should we be aiming for a higher number in that district?
Well, I think if it was up to us, we'd be asking for 30 or 40%. 10% is simply the maximum the state will allow us to ask.
Okay, even though it's not like a commercial area, is that 10% limit for commercial areas or anything that's non-residential? How's
I
it
believe it's
phrased?
commercial, residential has a different one, correct?
Because this is not zone commercial though, right? Like, it's not a business, official design, it's not a commercial district, is it? I should probably know this, but I do not.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the attachment on the last page of the report where I think we've updated the table there.
I think the state code calls it non-residential
Okay,
zones.
so
right?
if
'Cause
it's
that includes
non-residential, then it's,
industrial,
yeah, this is definitely that.
different
Okay,
zones.
thank you. A couple other questions. What kinds of policy documents are like other localities using to achieve a higher percentage? You referred to that in the staff doc. I'm just curious, like what are some examples that you're seeing from other localities? I'm not asking about the 10%. I'm in support of the 10% recommendation as well, acknowledging all of the complexities and the trade-offs that we have to work through. But like if we're aiming for higher than that, like how do we incentivize it?
So this will become clear as we come back with a fuller report on this. But for example, in Alexandria, they have just a full document called the landscape requirements, and you can read through it. It's like 100 pages of really detailed requirements for their landscape. And for us, we kind of have the streetscape requirements, but it doesn't really fully address the problem as sort of head on as those landscape requirements do. And then in Alexandria, there's a couple of small area plans that sort of address the issue and kind of through policy are able to go above 10%.
Okay.
It kind of comes down to the practice of negotiating and ultimately reviewing SE and site plan proposals. And some of the battle wounds of dealing with land use attorneys and their design teams in terms of which documents are referenced in those conversations. When we get to the voluntary concessions and final negotiations, comp plan elements, small area plans, streetscape standards, any document like that that enables an applicant to demonstrate why they should be off the hook, or perhaps that requirement doesn't apply in this case. That's something that next year we have to evaluate, because if those documents continue to either be silent or require a less stringent requirement, that puts us at a disadvantage and kind of waters down the overall goal that we're trying to achieve. So either changing the role those documents play in the SC process, or verifying that all of our documents speak the same language and have clarity in terms of our new elevated expectation.
Yeah, so we're baking trees as sort of like a core part of Falls Church City's identity into all of those documents. That's the
Right,
idea.
and I think another example, I think there's only like 2 small area plans, the east and west end, I think, that actually speak to a specific tree canopy requirement. I think it's like 15%, if I'm not wrong.
Is that a goal or a requirement? A goal?
Target. It's not
Target,
a
yeah.
requirement. And there's some area plans that I think don't mention it at all. But that's partly because when they were created. And I think we're at a point where biophilic design, canopy, right, heat island effects, those are kind of emerging issues that we just need to address and find a way where they can live in our documents as we gradually update them. Recognize that we can't change every single document in 1 year.
No,
So-
yeah, but as we're updating them, keeping that in mind, I think that's smart. You mentioned, shade, biophilic design, green roofs, and could those things be like an emergency valve on, sites that like really cannot comply with this 10% on-site? Like, is there room for negotiation there? Or do we really think like anybody should be able to comply with that?
I think everybody should comply.
Okay, thank you.
That's 10% is, if you ask people that really care about this, 10% is laughable.
Is too small.
We should
Yeah.
not even be having a conversation about 10%.
Yeah. Okay, and then another question on sort of like, achieving that higher number. Like, are you sort of contemplating prioritizing trees more in the SC criteria? Is that something that is sort of being discussed? Because I know that's a complex, like what are we evaluating these different projects on? I know we have these like primary criteria that are the 3 things that we really care about, and then all these secondary criterias, and I think trees are in there. And so, like, if we really want that to be the message to developers that we value trees, like, we could elevate it or have that discussion. It's probably a can of worms.
It will be, and we'll get through it, but I think that's, looking ahead to next year, that's going to be the conversation we'll need to have, and elevating this as a priority, what does it do to other priorities?
Yeah, it's a trade-off, all of
And
these things.
I don't think we're going to end up with a clean and convenient formula that says on every given site, we can dictate, if affordable housing kind of wins the competition over canopy, or sustainability wins, over both. It's kind of,
We need it all, yeah.
right. So I think we'll find a way to get there, but it does have to be a debate about other objectives that every single site may be asked to address.
Yeah. One other observation I had when I was looking at this table is like, I think anecdotally, the least liked building is the Modera, like that building. And it's at the bottom of the list, right? 3%. So like there's been the reaction from the residents to that building. I think there are other reasons why people don't really, in particular, really don't like that building, but that might be a big part of it, is the lack of trees. Trees make for like much more attractive spaces, and we are sort of like curating the public space that all of our residents are spending time in, and so we need to make those places livable, attractive, nice to be in, safe, all of those things. Trees are a big part of that.
I think it also gets into an equity issue where we don't want to end up in an environment where renters who,
Yeah,
as of our latest counts, make up 45% of the population here, that they are not able to enjoy the benefits of tree canopy that only homeowners can
those
because of where they
immediate
live.
benefits, yeah.
So I think we're in a position to strategically kind of inform and impact that environment, and maybe have a small change to make sure that at least we're doing what we can in the context of other priorities that are placed on commercial sites that the residential neighborhoods don't really have to deal with, so.
Yeah,
Can I break in?
go ahead, I'm done.
Is Modera Founders Two,
Yes.
Tate Building?
Yep.
What would the percentage of canopy be if along Ellison Street, instead of the lawn that ended up there, we had required that that be planted with trees? Because that was just, what they recommended, and we liked the look of it, frankly. And I think, actually, it turned out very well.
I don't have that exact number off the top of my head, but I can say each tree would have been about, counted for about 275 square feet. So if you put, 4 or 5 trees there, I mean, that's another, 4 trees would be, apologies, about just over 1,000. Let me see what our charts.
Bumping the percentage up to what?
Yeah, it would have been small, but I think it would have really improved the Ellison Street side, to have road trees.
Were trees not discussed for that little park area, or was there some reason that we couldn't do them? I
Well,
don't.
there are a couple of trees at the corner of Southwest
Yeah,
and,
right.
and Ellison.
Okay.
My recollection is, again, we were so focused on affordable housing as the marquee feature of that building, along with all the other things, but that in particular, that we did not dwell on trees, and I'm not sure there was an understanding, or let me put it positively, there could be a greater understanding that, if choosing between lawn and tree, you all would prefer tree.
Yeah.
Which is not what I would prefer, but, I like the way it looks, the way it turned out, but I can understand how you could have an intelligent discussion about that. And, yeah, I should know the answer to that. Like, oh, yeah, we talked about that, and we decided that,
I thought there was a stormwater.
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there are
I
other
don't-
factors involved, whatever. Anyway, leads me to one other question, which is there, the function of trees as stormwater management tools, as mentioned, I think, on your very first slide. Is there any comparable chart to the one that's up now on what the underground capture devices are for each of these developments, so that we could answer that other public question of, there's, runoff from that development? It's like, no, in fact, there's actually less runoff. Well, I don't believe that because they cut all the trees down. Well, trees are not the only element of stormwater management in modern construction. And as far as I don't know if Development Services has access to numbers that would show that there's an underground activity that, captures, holds, and releases over time, stormwater events. Is that information available to you all from somebody?
So I don't deal with stormwater directly, but I can answer some of these questions, or partially answer, I suppose. Depending on when the stormwater code changed, I believe current projects cannot release more water post-development than pre-development.
Right.
All developments have to show that in some degree. Now, I'm sure Founders 1 and 2, I'm sure that those fall under that law, but yeah, they have to show that on their site plan.
Yeah.
And that is publicly available information.
Right. Yeah, it may be unnecessarily exhaustive to, although it would be kind of interesting, because my perception would be that, the Broadway, we didn't have ourselves together enough to require a big underwater capture, and so they've always had issues related to their location right on top of a spring. And some of the other newer developments, yeah, we ought to be able to show, at any rate, in explaining all this to the public, that's a component that's worth, making the public aware of, because it does have some stormwater mitigation impact.
Yeah, one of the benefits of trees. Thank you, Mr. Duncan. I know we're running a little behind.
It reminds me of the kid who was the youth rep on the tree commission one time, and he said after a year of sitting through these meetings, he said, I never knew so many people could talk so much about trees.
A lot to say about them. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Norman, you're good? Thank you for joining us. Yeah, okay. Mr. Stevens? Okay, great. Well, thank you both so much for all of the research that you're done. So, when is this coming back to us? Sometime next year, I think is the plan that you said at the top. You're doing more research, more date in November? Oh, okay.
So we're going, it's gonna be a busy month. There is a council work session on the 17th. Recommendations not changing, but we'll be revealing the remainder of our data analysis. The week after, we will have our first reading with the council, allowing us to come back and have a public hearing on this with the planning commission.
In early December.
Correct. And that's how we're doing it.
But the recommendation is not changing. Okay.
The recommendation's not changing, and then late January, I believe, is the final council meeting for the summer.
You got us for a public hearing on the 17th of December.
We did until and then we moved it to December 3rd, I believe. 'Cause I had-
Yeah, that would be better.
Hmm?
So we, December 3rd. And that's just for this first phase.
Yeah. Great.
The other
Okay.
one's not currently scheduled just yet.
Okay. Thank you both
Thank
very
you so
much for the
you.
presentation, for answering all of our questions, and for all the work.
If
An
anything else
important
comes up, you got my email.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. All right, well, that takes us to, oh, and Ms. Norman, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. So that takes us to our next work session item, which is zoning cleanups. I'm sorry that we're running behind, Jack.
Not quite. We got 6 minutes.
We had a lot to say about trees, so, yeah.
That's okay.
Bye, thanks.
Yep, item 7B tonight, yeah, is a work session on 3 cleanup items. And these are true cleanup items meant to clarify meeting where ambiguity has been identified in the course of administering the zoning ordinance, remove obsolete language, in this case, an obsolete code section, and to otherwise increase clarity. So the 3 items, the first involves the half-story definition. The second one I'll cover is the antenna ordinance, and then lastly, the obsolete code section is section 481104, which is a single line. So regarding the half-story definition, of course, relates to, the measurement of buildings, and is currently in conflict with the recently updated accessory dwelling ordinance. The half-story definition actually discusses when a half-story is considered a full story if the person living in there is not your janitor. So staff recommends removing that clause from the half-story definition because it is in conflict with the recently updated accessory dwelling ordinance. And so there's this last,
Sorry, the old language mean that, this is not important, but like, does the old language mean that if a half-story was lived in by a janitor, then it was considered a full story?
it
Then how am I
is the
reading it?
opposite if I'm reading it right. If it's a half-story, if it's occupied by someone other than a janitor or other employee of his family.
It was like a unit for an employee, like a
Yeah.
resident manager.
An au pair
It's more like
or,
in a commercial situation though, right? Wouldn't this have also applied, so
Alright,
it's applying like
so-
it'd be more of a commercial? I mean, I don't know, did the ordinance ever talk about like domestic, like, employees versus regular?
I feel like I'm gonna take us down a rabbit hole that's
Yeah.
unnecessary.
No, no,
I just, it was
Right.
curiosity.
That has other things in it. I wonder, yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like it was more intended to be used in a commercial, like if we used to allow, like in a commercial setting, like maybe you'd have an apartment for an employee or something like above the store or above the factory, but, maybe that's what it was for.
All these wealthy ancestors here.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I just think it was probably more geared towards commercial uses that had an accessory unit, as opposed to,
If you lived above a,
yeah, 'cause you wouldn't have,
Everything.
I don't know if the word janitor even in the old days implied like a domestic
Yeah.
servant or something. You wouldn't call them
but
janitor.
Yeah,
still,
this-
still not applicable to current state.
It made me wonder when this was written. Like, do you know how old, like the original code, when the original code, was it like, does it date back to the founding of the city?
We can look back in Municode. It has the reference dates for every time each section was
The
updated.
40s?
Yeah,
Because this seems,
I think 40s.
okay,
Thin.
okay. It seems older.
Yeah. I mean, it would take some digging because obviously the computers didn't exist back then, so it wouldn't have that digital trace. But
I mean, zoning only dates to what, like the early 1900s?
Yeah, I mean, it started becoming popular in Northern Virginia in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
20s, 30s, and 40s is when it became popular around here. It had existed in New York as early as like 1910.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it would be an interesting research project to see when the half-story definition was introduced. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, in terms of the cleanup, it would just be removing this second part of the definition. And so the definition would be purely about, the structure of the wall.
Mm-hmm. Not who's living in it.
Right, correct. And the draft code is at the end of this report, if anyone's interested in that. So regarding the antenna ordinance, now we do have, this was last amended in 1986. Before there were several different types of common antennas. And so our ordinance specifies in the antenna ordinance that it relates particularly to television and radio antennas, but the most common type that the city sees applications for are telecommunications specifically. So the cleanup is getting rid of, wherever antennas are mentioned, it's typically preceded by the specific kind of antennas. And so the cleanup item is just removing those descriptors and just having antenna. And a definition has been added in the definition section of the ordinance to describe what an antenna is considered, and that would include all the kind of operating equipment used to for the antenna to function. So there's several kind of technical terms that the zoning administrator is included in there that she sees and deals with on a regular basis for these kind of applications.
Thinking ahead a little bit, it's kind of off the charts here, but I don't know if you've heard of induction charging for electric vehicles. That's where you can do it without a cord. It kind of does it with radio waves.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this would anticipate that in the future at some point. If it's, in other words, is the definition of antenna kind of very precise, or it would exclude a lot of other things. Maybe it's not important for that now, but I could see, given the widespread use of Bluetooth and other things like that, that possibly other things could be captured by this at some point, depending
Sure.
on how it's written.
We can, I'm happy to go to the definition that we've included, and we could take a look at that.
Yeah, I'm probably pushing it too far, but
It's like do we have is there another part of the code that we're more where it regulates cell antennas more detailed, or is this it? Do we have anything like that for co-locations, and do we have any other information or sections of the ordinance that speak to that?
I believe this is it. So there's just one section of the ordinance, but the ordinance itself has several sections. That's 6 or 7. So it talks about, how antennas are
Yard.
regulated. But again, it really kind of, this may be something that, to your point, Mr. Krasner, may need to be updated more thoroughly. But this cleanup item, the scope is just broadening it to include all antenna types.
I mean, how that we're getting taller buildings in the city, the chance that someone may want to add some, cell antennas to fix a dead spot somewhere is more. I'm surprised, I guess it hasn't come up before. Maybe we didn't have tall enough structures, people weren't interested. I mean, I'm surprised we didn't ever get an application for a tower or a monopole or something. And Have we ever seen anything like that? Do we have one in town? I don't know if we
Yeah,
do.
there's one over there,
We have a monopole or a flat, like when they
where
hide
the
in the
Aldi
flagpole?
is, there's
Yeah,
that
by the
lot over there.
Aldi,
There's
there's
a
that.
real
Oh,
tall-
yeah. How do we regulate that? Is that in this section?
I assume it would be.
Size and number of ground
Yep.
mounted?
Every antenna requires a special use permit, so there's no by right antenna installations.
Okay.
There's different allowances, I think, based on like the signal. Like there's language in there, like if a homeowner wanted to put or cite their antenna for their TV, they had to prove that the signal was such that it would not allow their TV to work. There's sort of some archaic language.
In some ways, that was a loophole. I wonder if that's how that thing got built, because this just talks about satellite and television. I wonder if, when that monopole got built, if they just somehow, the zoning administrator said, well, it's not, you don't need a special permit, you can just do it.
Sure. I mean, depending on when that went up too, because this was last amended, like I said, in '86. And I don't know the extent of those updates when that happened. So it could be that the ordinance was substantially written in '86 and maybe that went up before.
I mean, in that sense, this is good in that it closes that loophole, although it's very restrictive. So like, right, it talks about nothing can be taller than,
Yeah.
12 feet. The diameter should not exceed 12 feet. No ground mounted, 10 feet. No ground mounted antenna can exceed 10 feet. So that would like pretty much preclude a monopole.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
under that.
So, anyhow, well, yeah, I mean, I know this is a cleanup, and we're not looking to like do a wholesale, new part of the ordinance, but, yeah, that may trigger that. Okay.
I assume the 5G antennas for the telecommunications are excluded from this, right?
This would include all antenna types.
So that would include that?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think that, don't they put the antennas for those on the poles?
I don't know the particulars.
Yeah.
Like on Dominion poles, I mean,
Yeah.
like, yeah, sometimes they have like smaller, right, like Brett. Those have a very limited coverage area because they're low to
Right,
the ground.
right.
Yeah. So telecommunications, right, are the most common type now, right? But they're not specifically, because the ordinance is so specific in the types of satellites it's dealing with now, are the zoning administrators having, similar conversations with applicants that this, would apply to all?
Any antenna, this now just says any antenna.
Yes.
Is covered by this thing.
Yeah. So like, we can go down the
Right, like
draft
the
code.
Do we have a definition of the word antenna?
Yeah.
I think that's what
That's
you're,
what I was
that's
asking.
what you're bringing
Yeah.
up.
So Akita has to consider each application for an antenna individually?
Yeah, so every application goes to the BZA for a special use permit.
Even like the corporate placement, I mean, down
Yeah.
in Tennessee, my
All
old
antenna
home
type.
place,
Mm.
they did not have that requirement, and all of a sudden I went there one day and there's this massive pole in the middle of the yard, and it's there to support the internet for the neighborhood, because
That would
That
require a
would-
special use permit.
that would
yeah.
not, that would require a special use permit here.
So, yeah, so if Founder's Row wanted to put a 5G or cell antenna on top of the building,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or I wanted to add a satellite dish to my
Yeah.
house, they both go through this.
Yes, correct, that's my understanding.
Okay.
And the definition here includes any similar equipment used for transmission and reception of electromagnetic signals.
Does that cover the charging you were talking about?
It probably does.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's several different types here: transmit, receive radio, television, cellular, data, or other wireless communication signals. So that would all be captured under the antenna ordinance.
That's a dumb question. Electromagnetic signals include microwave signals. Are we looping in microwaves to this?
I assume so,
A 10-foot tall microwave.
or any
And it's
similar.
not a microwave, but it does
Yeah.
produce electromagnetic signals.
Yeah.
I can make a point to follow up on that. If we need to specifically include that in the definition, we can.
Does not
I
include
get the ridiculous.
microwaves? Is that the idea?
Well, it's just like,
If we
I-
need to specifically mention microwaves?
microwave.
The
like,
microwave is not an antenna, right?
Those
I
fall under
agree, but
FCC
it's,
regulations, don't they? I mean,
I
those are-
agree, but it's, they transmit microwave,
But
which
it's
are
in your
electromagnetic.
house, in your private property. I mean, unless somebody's putting the microwave in their backyard, like microwaving things.
There's-
I don't know, seems like an edge case.
I agree. I'm trying to think of like, if I didn't have to like sleep with a lawyer every night, like I probably wouldn't think of these things, but it
Poisoned
comes with
your
the
brain.
territory.
Yeah, how can somebody? Okay, we all learned a lot about antennas.
We don't want to dirty up your cleanup.
I mean, right, there's like a whole, I mean, at the time, like, it's 10, 20 years ago when cellular, technology was proliferating, like monopoles, and the proliferation of cell equipment was a huge zoning issue. It was like, until, surprising we never I guess because we're low. I mean, anywhere there's a high spot is really where they want to go, and we're kind of like, the hills are around town or just kind of just outside, like Mount Daniels in the county. There's
Right.
there's a couple other hills just outside, so like, that's probably why we didn't sort of see a rush where we had to
But
deal with it.
people,
Because otherwise we would have dealt with it early, you would think. I mean, I know we do have some.
yeah. Didn't the schools just review one? I thought the schools were adding one. Did I dream that? I thought there was a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, I'm pulling up some, like, I don't know how accurate it is, there's some like, commercial, some third-party website that like locates antennas near you, and there's like, they show some in the city. I don't know, like on buildings, I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Well, they must be complying with our
I don't know,
regulations
maybe
to-
we didn't, maybe
for
we had
them
a
to be
loophole,
screened.
because they weren't television or whatever, maybe we didn't, maybe we
They're
weren't.
allowed.
There
It says,
used to
it
be,
says
yeah.
all roof-mounted antennas exceeding 3 feet above the roof line shall be concealed from ground level. So you just can't see them.
We did have, there was a
But I'm saying they needed a special permit, I don't think they were getting special.
across the street from city, had an antenna.
Yeah, I wonder if this inadvertently opens up a can of worms where now, like, things that before that people were just adding to their buildings, all of a sudden now triggers a special permit?
Yeah.
Because before we weren't regulating it? I don't know. It'd be interesting to know, like, how many antennas we have in the city that just didn't go through this process and are just there. I think there are some. I mean, I'd have to drive around. I mean, they're pretty well concealed these days, but, yeah, I feel like there are some on top of buildings. Like, you know where there's some? On Oak, on the corner of South Oak,
Yeah.
that older office
That
building.
building?
Isn't
Oh,
there-
yeah.
Aren't there cell towers on top of that? Or cell antennas on top of that?
That tall building, that 10-story.
That older office building there that's like always half vacant?
You said electromagnetic, right?
Yeah, that one. Isn't there, I feel like there's a cell tower on top of that, not tower,
Yeah.
antennas on top of it.
So that'd be captured in the new definition,
I don't
electromagnetic.
know. I don't know, but it'd be interesting to know. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think in general, like, taking out the reference to
You're saying that
TV
might be too
only is
strong.
good, but I wonder if we were gonna open up some, a rush of special permits at the BZA. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know, I mean, before you make the change, if there's not something else you want to do in addition. But, I don't know. Yeah, 803. Yeah, there are some on that one. I don't know. It seems like there are cell antennas in the city now that probably didn't get a special permit. So, yeah, there definitely are some on top of that building, that's just for instance, 803. I don't know if they ever got I doubt they ever got a special permit.
Can you clarify when this special permit is required? Is it for any antenna, or is it just like if you're putting an antenna and you have to meet these regulations?
Yep. Section 48-1208, special use permit required, says no satellite television antenna or ground-mounted conventional television or radio antenna may be erected on any lot without obtaining a special use permit. So the,
Change it just to say any antenna.
would just be antenna, yeah,
Then literally every antenna needs a special permit.
right.
Is the words electromagnetic, sorry, I'm coming back to this. Is the word electromagnetic signals in the current,
There's no definition right now.
so we're changing both the getting rid of the like TV or radio antenna specificities.
Right,
And adding the definition of an antenna.
correct.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like Mr. Krasner has questions about the special use permit being sort of broadly apply to all antennas. Is that something that you could follow up with Akita on?
Sure.
Just to find out, like, I don't know if they needed building permits or electrical permits to install any of this stuff. It'd be interesting to know how many antennas, if the city had to issue any permits for antennas that like were not television and radio or whatever, so they didn't need a special permit. But now with this change, they actually would have needed it, and we wouldn't have been able to issue the building permit. They would have had to go to the BZA. I just don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to know if all of a sudden now, things before that were pretty routine and weren't really raising any eyebrows, all of a sudden now we'll have to go through a special permit process. You know,
So-
by this change, like, I just don't know. Maybe, yeah, I don't know how we were interpreting it. Maybe there was some innovative zoning administrator interpretation that was
By
being
right
done.
antennas, huh?
Yeah, because now this would make no antennas by right, where it seems like now, some of them might be. I don't know.
Yeah, so far this year, as of the staff report, and I can check with Akita that these numbers are still good, because I think this was put together in early October. So far in this year, as of October, the city's received 6 antenna applications, and we average a total of 3 every year. We've averaged 3 every year since 2020.
But those haven't got, did those go to the BZA? I'm not aware of the BZA approving a bunch of special permits for antennas.
I believe so.
They did go to the BZA? Okay. When I was on the BZA, which was a while ago, for 4 years, I never saw one antenna application. 0. I just wonder if they actually went. I don't know. You might want to double check if they're
I
actually.
can double check.
If they were going. I have a couple people I know in the BZA, and I don't recall them ever mentioning they were reviewing antennas. They review a lot of signs. They're kind of cranky about that. They don't like having to review so many sign applications, but in addition to the residential stuff that they do, but I haven't heard about antennas, so you might want to check if they're,
Okay.
maybe we weren't enforcing the ordinance properly. I don't know what was going on, but now we would kind of have to. Like I said, maybe before there was an interpretation, you know, I could see our former zoning administrator, you know, who was very creative, you know, finding a way to, you know, say, well, doesn't say cellular, so you're good. Whereas this change would make it so that you couldn't even try to interpret it because it'd be so black and white. So, yeah, there's something to think about. You know, we don't want to have the BZA full of antenna applications for stuff that isn't.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, I think one thing that would be useful is if we were clearer on the definition of what an antenna is, because the way that it's currently laid out, light bulbs, electric heaters, microwave was the joke, but like, if somebody didn't like that you put up lighting in your front yard, then they could say that technically an antenna because it transmits electromagnetic signals, right? Like, so I think that piece of this is
An
something we
outdoor
should consider.
Wi-Fi, some people put like a Wi-Fi antenna like
Yep.
in their backyard because they
It's like
want to get
Bluetooth.
better coverage out in the
Yep.
back of the, you know,
So,
out where they sit under a tree or something. I don't know, yeah, so I don't know, yeah, we should be careful. We don't want to like be too strict.
Okay.
Because I think we're really worried about, if we were going to require special permits, it'd be for like large, very
like-
tall
I
structures.
yeah, I definitely get the point.
Visually kind
Right,
of
things that are obtrusive,
problematic.
right. Like in the
Yeah.
old days, like, you know, in old zoning ordinances, you would often see, but, you know, if people were ever, remember when people used, there was a hobby, when people were into ham radio and stuff.
Yeah.
There were some guys who would install, like, it was usually guys, they would install like large antennas on their house or in their backyard, like really big ones. And so a lot of these parts of the code were geared to like control that. So some guy, some hobbyist, you know, didn't like erect a 50-foot antenna on his roof so he could talk to somebody in Belgium or something, you know, on the ham radio, amateur radio. So yeah, that was like the intent of it. I don't think the intent now would be to, you know, require that kind of review for little panels that are completely concealed, you know. I would argue if it's completely concealed behind a parapet or something, we don't care, you know. If it's like short and below the roof line and concealed,
Well, it's somebody else's issue that
yeah.
regulates that kind of stuff.
Right, I mean, from a zoning perspective, we wouldn't care. I mean, it could be our issue, but I don't think we want that to be our issue, you know, for those types of things. There'd be other things maybe we would want to restrict it, but not, yeah. So just be careful. That's like a small change. That's the problem with anything in the zoning code. Little changes can have weird unintended consequences. So it's worth talking to Akita and others about, whoever's working on this to, you know, with you to try to make sure we're not opening a can of worms.
Sure. That's a good comment. Thank you.
Do you live in your half story? All right, Jack, do you want to finish your, I think you've gone gotten through 2 of the 3 items in your report. I'm sorry for the
That's okay.
discussion.
Little did you know.
The last one is an obsolete code section. It's one line. It reads conditional uses permitted by special use permits are prohibited. It's not connected to any other section of the code. This is something that was basically orphaned from a previous code cleanup. So
What does that
the
even mean?
recommendation is just to delete it.
Conditional uses permitted by such are prohibited where? Yeah, like where?
Right. It's not tied to any other district or use. It was clearly meant to communicate something at some point, but now it just doesn't make any sense on its own.
That is weird.
Yeah.
All right. Man.
We should have ChatGPT go through all of our code and find all of the.
I was thinking that too, yeah.
Not the world's worst idea.
Doesn't even make any sense. That's like internally inconsistent. The whole point of a conditional use is that it is permitted if you get it approved by special permit. We're saying, it doesn't make any sense, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's trying to get around something, but I don't quite.
Yeah.
All right, great. Any other questions about microwaves or antennas or anything
I
else
mean,
that?
just like a general comment, not done, these 3, yeah, we already beat these up, but like, I'm sure there are many others. I know, you know, there's only so much we can maybe bite off in one, you know, one chew, so to speak, or chew in one bite, but it's yeah, there are a lot of other things in our ordinance that are,
Out of date.
yeah, I mean, and it runs the gamut. I know, like, again, like, there are big problems, little problems, but there's so many inconsistent stuff in there, which you guys know and Keita knows. I've talked to her about it, and I know it's like, right, you know, we only have so much bandwidth on the staff side to like focus on any one of these issues at any one time, but, you know, I don't know how you pick these specific 3. These are maybe like the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, these are
Yeah.
just the most straightforward, the
Yeah.
lowest hanging fruit. We've got a larger list of things to address, that range in substance and warrant definitely more conversation and probably some engagement, some additional engagement. And so those will be, so we've got an ongoing list.
Yeah, and I've talked to Akita about having like, and she's, I think, on board with the idea of like a work program where like, you know, you gotta lay it out. It's not all gonna happen immediately, and, you know, you gotta work on what's a higher priority, but, you know, until we, you know, the better, you know, cataloging it and saying, okay, we know that these sections are potentially problematic, and, you know, we wanna, in the future, you know, eventually get to it. I mean, it may take time, and priorities can change, but yeah, keeping a running list of problems is really important in the zoning ordinance because, yeah, there's so much in there. And our code, yeah, I think, you know, it's so easy to ignore it. And that's what's happened, unfortunately, with our ordinance is that things have been ignored over the years, and then you wind up with like, right, tons of just one-off interpretations. And, you know, like the latest, I think, thing that was brought that to a head, I know, was the driveway thing that like, you know, previous zoning administrators were allowing. There's a weird part of our code that says you can only have a driveway that's like 1 car wide, basically, you know, and there's a bunch of weird, you know, conditions about it. But our previous zoning administrator had found a way to like sort of kind of get around it for people building these new houses that have two car garages and want a 2-car wide driveway. But our code really didn't allow it. That's why a lot of our driveways, if you notice, they neck down, and it kind of gets awkward. But some people have, you know, don't have that. And it was inconsistent, and it's because the code was kind of inconsistent. And I know Akita had like, now, you know, she was kind of the new sheriff in town and said, well, it says this, I'm enforcing this. And it went to the BZA, they appealed it. I mean, there's been a couple higher profile things where people were like, but wait, this other guy got to do it. And so, yeah, that's what happens when we don't update stuff regularly. So, anyhow, and I know, you know, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, you guys know that, but yeah, so keeping a running tally of like problems is important, you know, and some are going to require more work, but yeah, so this is good. I'm glad we're doing the cleanup. We should have more cleanups. And if we had a list, we could comment on, you know, to see what the priorities are or what's on the list, that would be good.
Okay. So this is coming back to y'all for your public hearing. It says December 17th here, but that meeting's been canceled, so it's coming back to you December 3rd for your
Great.
public hearing.
Thank you. All right. So I think that brings us to information items. Any commissioner reports?
Got
I
one.
always look at Mr. Stevens and Mr. Duncan. They always have something
Yeah,
for
he
us.
goes to a lot of meetings. I attended for our chair,
Yes,
a meeting of the chairs from around the region. So I guess that started up this year, kind of an informal group of exchanging information. So we met on the 17th of October, and I'll just kind of quickly share the topics that we talked about. We talked about single-stair design for the smaller multifamily buildings, and the chair of the Montgomery County Commission wrote a very nice article on that. So if anybody has a, kind of a burning interest on, what's behind all the single-stair discussion, this is a pretty good article doing that. They talked about some of the jurisdictions making approval for housing in on faith-based property easier as a way to kind of one additional tool to address the housing problem. Right now, I mean, you can try to do that on let's say a church property, but it might be very difficult, so they're trying to look for ways to make that easier. I took note of the fact that Montgomery County has a 15% affordable dwelling requirement. So that's just it. If you want to do something here, it's got to have at least 15%. A problem that the other jurisdictions are having that I don't think we have here is that after they approve a project, nothing happens. The developer, for whatever reason, just kind of departs, moves on to something else, and they don't go through with the approval that they received. So I don't think that's something that we have here, but that was a big problem. Several jurisdictions, Arlington mentioned that, Montgomery County, not sure about Fairfax, whether they mentioned that or not. Then the other big issue that they're all working on is conversion of commercial to residential, and again, I don't think we're doing much of that here, so. Anyway, it's a good idea to get together with the other jurisdictions. I guess they want to try to meet quarterly, so we'll see where that goes. That's it.
Awesome, thank you.
Speaking of that, do we have any update on Econize? I mean, they got their entitlement, and that's a project that.
There was a big for sale sign in front of that building after we put that site plan.
Actually, Yesenia Jewelers too. We got two projects that I would count in that basket of, we approved them and,
Nothing's
or
happening.
wanted to approve them, and what's going on.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point, when we do a year end or year beginning, you could catch us up on what's happening at either of those, either or both.
Both seem to be at these late stages where
Yeah.
literally a handful of stormwater comments and other things need to be addressed, but I think in each case, we're looking for an efficient path where some initial site improvements or demolition can take place as those additional items are resolved. With Econize, I think they're also going to be gradually, eventually impacted by the next townhouse development that's being proposed by Madison Homes, because that's the block they're targeting, so. But I think there's a target there to finish construction by next summer, so.
Okay.
We didn't actually approve Yesenia, right?
We didn't.
But I guess maybe that's a moot point.
We-
Yeah, we ran out of time on that one before we had seen it a few times, but then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Jack sent around an invitation for the West Falls Church Metro, which is not to be confused with the West Falls development on our side, on Wednesday, November 19th at 9:30. Groundbreaking ceremony with all the Fairfax and Metro people, and we are invited. Tech, right, I assume hit, should be the whole gang, I guess. So I asked where, and specifically, they didn't seem to know just yet, but somewhere details will forthcome about exactly where the groundbreaking event will be. Anyway, we're invited. EDA met Tuesday night, last night, yeah. And
Didn't that change, or did you go?
yeah, I
Oh,
went.
you went, okay.
Yeah, and they mostly talked about things that don't relate to us. So there was some discussion towards the end about rentals, commercial rentals filling out that, all the locations, West Falls and Founders 1, Founders 2, seemed to be going along okay. There was also a little discussion about Stratford Garden and their hope that they might clear the hurdles set before them sometime in December. Is that?
We're closely monitoring almost weekly site visits.
It's looking better.
The outside is at least, yeah.
Does it seem that they're all going to open the whole shebang at once rather than their initial opening it in phases?
I'm not sure how many phases that structure can
Support.
be broken up into, but that's something our building official will be closely monitoring as we get to the
Okay.
CO issuance.
And there was discussion about the fall, or the winter Wonderland event that is going to be in early December, I guess. I'm not sure. Do we meet? Yeah, we meet again before that. So
That won't be at Founders this year, right?
I think it is. I think it's
Oh,
being
it's still
run
there?
by, it's being run by Founders.
Oh, okay.
And they're supposed to really, have the whole range of Santa's train and the fire truck and, all that. Tuesday night after the 1st of December, whatever that first Tuesday in December is. Anyway, that was the EDA.
Thank you.
The Architectural Advisory Board has added 2 more permanent members, which means they now have 4 and now have enough for a quorum. So they will start meeting again next week. They have not met, I believe, in 3 or 4 months. So they should have some input on things starting next week.
Okay. We haven't had too many projects coming through, but
Not much for them to talk about, but
good time to not have a quorum.
yeah, I did the last one virtually, and my 6-year-old walked in, and they were talking about Lucky Strike Bowling, and he asks every time we drive by the bowling alley when we're going to change the name to Lucky Strike. So people are paying attention, is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, they redid it. I did have a question about the council discussion on Vision Zero and Complete Streets. Is that something that we're going to have an opportunity to weigh in on, or is it not coming to us? I'm also a little confused about like when things are sort of made as amendments to our comprehensive plan chapters or sort of like supplemental pieces of the comprehensive plan chapters, and when they're just sort of like approved by resolution by council. So any clarity on that? Because they're definitely of interest to Planning Commission.
I'll start.
Sure. I talked to Amanda Brain, our Public Works Director, and she's planning to come by when y'all receive the CIP quarterly update, which is, I think, in December. Let me have to look ahead. She plans to join Caitlin for that presentation and plans to speak about that.
Okay, great.
So I would direct any kind of questions about the Vision Zero specific initiatives to her when she arrives, or if you want to give them to us, we can start working on those
I
before.
mean, nothing but enthusiasm. I mean, I may have questions, but I guess I was wondering why we sort of baked Complete Streets like into the Vision Zero plan. It just feels like I don't know. Maybe that's normally that's how localities handle these things, but Complete Streets just strikes me as more of like kind of like a plan for like what we want our public spaces to look like, though maybe we're only applying it to new developments and not to other streets like Lincoln Avenue, for example, that we're redoing. Like, so that's my question is, some of these things seem like CIP related or Planning Commission related, and so adopting like a Complete Streets policy seems different than like a Vision Zero resolution. I just don't know how all these things fit together and how they fit in the comprehensive plan and the CIP. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think Amanda's going to do a good job of kind of highlighting what I think is becoming a newer strategy by DPW and others to streamline all those different initiatives. It's if you really start to add it all up, it gets a little bit cumbersome, and many have a lot of overlapping priorities, sometimes involving similar blocks. And I think the focus is to really figure out a way where we can be more agile, move quicker, have more predictability with respect to how we're solving certain typical problems. But also I get to a point where I think we can kind of streamline the procedure for the way some of these projects even get born. So I think you'll see her cover a lot of those ideas, which are really still in the inception stage. I think we're just kind of beginning to develop the framework, and a lot more work's going to happen next year as well.
Okay.
So they're tentatively scheduled for November the 19th?
Yeah,
Yep.
Correct.
We'll remove that tentative tag. That's confirmed.
but then council is also voting on the Vision Zero resolution next Monday,
I believe so.
and that includes the complete street. Okay. I'm all for all of it. So I just want to understand how it all fits together and how it fits with the neighborhood traffic calming program too. All right. So any other commissioner reports? That brings us to the director's report.
All right. Just following along the attachment that Jack was able to prepare, we completed our third quarter quarterly report. So with Emily's help, there's a lot of helpful information about all the different things that happened since July. So that document is attached to the packet that was posted. Very similar information that we've had in the first two quarters. In addition to that, there are two DPW updates, one involving Park Avenue Great Streets, where the consultant engineering firm has provided some additional information on the 90% plans. So we're passing that along. And similarly for the Sherrill Avenue Bridge, VDOT has made more information available on their 100% design drawing. So anytime we get those, we try to disseminate them to various groups. So that's kind of the Planning Commission's copy.
Thank you. Any questions on any of the director report items?
Kind of tangential in a way, but have we received any applications yet for accessory dwellings?
I know we've received at least one. And we've received several inquiries about it too. So I can double check on if that number's gone up. But with the first application came in at least over a month ago, I think. So it's possible there's more. But I do know we have at least one.
Yeah, be curious to see what kind of reaction, response we're getting. But in good time, nothing urgent.
I just wanted to say congrats to the zoning team on the win. There was like an award that they won, which is great. The VAPA awards ceremony. Sorry? Oh, Sharon, go ahead. Thank you for.
Thank you. I just wanted to, since Park Avenue, Great Street, 90% design finished up there, we did want to kind of follow up with you regarding the curb cut that is on Little Falls in front of Stratford Gardens. That there, the applicant at the time of their application is not doing anything with the curb cut there, but there's no need for the curb cut to be there. The 90% drawings do not show us going any further south than the design reading curb cut. And I'm wondering what, I know Matt, you were looking into that to kind of see what development there was, if the applicant was actually going to get rid of that curb cut, or if we were going to be able to extend the limit of disturbance to incorporate getting rid of that curb cut that we're not using.
We've done some additional due diligence, and we've been meeting with the builder, the restaurant owner. What we've learned is that at the time of the site plan approval, a waiver of loading space was approved. So the second curb cut on Little Falls that gets you into what is now a paved surface parking area is solely for parking purposes. And with that waiver, the applicant has then proceeded to kind of finalize their internal operations such that the first curb cut, which now, if you just look at it, leads right into the new expanded structure, is actually going to serve as part of their loading operations. They've poured some concrete at the edge of that curb cut that leads right into some of their doors. So that curb cut, while initially I think made sense to remove because it wasn't serving a purpose, we now have confirmed that it will in fact serve a loading purpose for the restaurant use. And therefore, we are inclined to keep it to ensure that their operations run smoothly and we're not creating other issues with their parking. So that, there's a reason why that curb cut was not included in the CIP project up the street. It was solely part of their site plan. There is some good news outside but adjacent to that area. They, in the process of locating a fire hydrant, created a pinch point in their clear sidewalk there. We've been able to work with them to expand the sidewalk to make sure that even with that fire hydrant, we've been able to kind of widen the clear sidewalk on what will be a very prominent corner. So to the south of the curb cut we just finished discussing, I think you actually walk by there tomorrow, you should see the finished condition now of kind of a healthy 6 foot instead of a 4 foot zone.
They're gonna have loading, I'm sorry. They're gonna have a loading, they're gonna be loading their, like right off the sidewalk there, as opposed to like coming into their parking lot? Is that what they're gonna use that curb cut for?
They're going to be accessing it using the existing curb cut, but if you look at what's been approved and what they finished completing outside of their building, there's actually a poured concrete driveway that leads right up to the building that does not compete with other uses and seating areas and parking on that site. So this was kind of their way of utilizing some existing infrastructure and carefully organizing their interior fit out to make that work.
Maybe. So that wasn't, I don't even remember. We approved that site plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think.
I don't remember that being an intention.
Right, did
of
we
that.
have that on there? I don't recall.
That use?
Not so many people did, no.
I don't,
It's,
Maybe it wasn't contemplated at the time.
I suspect they just evolved into that.
yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of not ideal. I guess it's done. It's done is done. I mean, I don't think we would have approved it if they had said we're gonna be loading, kegs of beer and whatever, like right in the front on that corner, off of that curb cut. Did they show closed on the site plan?
We could not see any,
We asked for them to remove the curb cut, but I think that,
ultimately it was still there.
yeah,
They
I think that was not,
So I don't recall. So the site plan did show it?
They were
being
not
removed?
agreeable to
oh, it
removing
did
it.
not.
Yeah.
I don't, sorry?
The applicant was not agreeable to removing the curb cut, so.
Yeah, I think the
approved
additional
site plan still
expense
shows
was
it.
a challenge.
Yeah, because they have 3 curb cuts on that site, and they weren't going to use the other one either. I mean, I think, right, they're not using, the one on Broad, they're
I
not.
think we're getting to
Have
an
3,
economic
yeah.
feasibility issue with them because
Yeah.
these are all common sense issues.
Right.
And I think on a typical site, we would obviously try to do that. I think the intent is to support kind of the adaptive reuse and kind of revitalization of a commercial use, which I think really helps with the character of the city.
It was a big push to get it.
Yeah, I mean, the city's good, but we should still not compromise on our values and our standards in the name of helping one particular business that may be there for a period of time and one day may leave and may sell. And so I think we need to be consistent on, how we're doing that kind of thing. I mean, when we're a small jurisdiction, we like to work closely with, landowners and tenants and, get people to help people out. But, I think, I remember on that one, pushing that issue with them, actually, and hearing, I mean, listen, every project's got a budget, and everyone would love to delete things from the budget that they'd rather not spend money on because it doesn't really help their bottom line. But, I mean, that's where the public-private kind of, interface happens. So anyhow, I mean, just a general comment. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone on that. I'm not privy to the discussions. I don't know what exactly happened, but, I think at least when we approve site plans, I guess that's not going to happen anymore. We were pretty intentional about things we did or didn't do. And so, I feel like the city should continue to treat what was approved as sort of the default, and any changes from that should be really carefully evaluated, especially when it's, something like that, which kind of goes against good urban design. Just my editorial on that. But anyway, I'm sure it'll be a good business where I think people are looking forward to it opening up. But yeah, I remember talking to them about that at the time, and we got a similar answer, like, well, we really don't want to spend money on taking that curb cut out.
Yeah, I think what's built reflects the approved plan, so I think we didn't see anything that violated the final set that we received. But I think the use of that poured concrete and the driveway, I did catch some people by surprise.
Okay.
Yeah, I think how we can best push by moving something in the document that we are hoping the vested intention is to not get. But it sounds like it's going to be loading off of little calls now. So that's all. It is what it is at this stage. Thank you though for following up with that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have another question?
I was just looking at my calendar. So are we finished with that, or are we?
Oh, go ahead.
the-
I think,
Yep.
yeah.
There's a board and commission appreciations dinner next Monday here at 6 o'clock for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. All right, any other questions on the director's report items?
Yeah, one question is sort of related to that last topic. Is it within the planning commission's purview at all to have any questions about either rideshare or loading, parking, or temporary parking on major thoroughfares? Like on Broad Street, on West Street, on Washington?
No. We tried to design, like, for example, Broad and
Yeah,
Washington.
Broad and Washington
We
has
designed a
those.
couple little, like,
Pull-ins.
yeah, pullouts for that very purpose. So it
Which are
certainly
just-
is in our purview when we're reviewing a plan.
But not like in general, like, there's a lot of loading for places, restaurants, and especially at Founder's Row.
Something becomes a
things like
traffic issue. Like, for example, you know, I mean, I know we've talked about it, like Bayer has come, I don't know to call them out, but we don't have that many car dealerships in town. And they came in for the site plan for their new facility. We talked about the problem of, like, you know, getting auto deliveries and sitting in the middle of Broad Street and with car carriers. And they promised us, no, we don't do that. We're not supposed to, you know, anyone who does that, we're gonna, you know, make sure any of our delivery drivers know not to do that. I see it all the time. I still see it, like,
Yeah, all the time.
almost weekly. I see it. So yeah, to the extent when we have an application and it's something physical with the site, we can definitely deal with
But
it.
not in a general sense. Like I see it on like at Dominion, at the Whole Foods, at places where they're doing deliveries or they're like the
It's like a
FedEx
traffic
truck is
enforcement
parked
issue.
there.
Technically, it's illegal to do that. You can't, you know, you can't just park a truck in the middle of, you know, and like, it's no stopping, no, you know, standing there. I think you're not supposed to park there. It becomes like an enforcement issue, you know, for our small police force, I think. I don't know if anyone else has an
Happens at Northgate too.
opinion about it, but yeah, we tried to account for that, you know, on Broad and Washington and some other projects, we've tried to allow for that. So knowing that people are gonna be getting Ubers and stuff.
Okay.
And we don't want people blocking lane of traffic, but it's hard, you know, to control human behavior can be difficult.
Yeah. Okay.
At what point in that vein do we go with the urban model, which is, you know, deliveries only between 10 and 2 or whatever, like they do in DC, so as at least not to clog rush hour traffic? And if we wanted to ask for that, what's the process? I agree with you. It's the non-lawyer that lives in my house is fed up with Uber and Lyft drivers just parking where they want to on Broad Street and letting people in and out. But it is a component of urban living that, you know, everybody else pretty well accepts. But there are loading restrictions in DC,
And
right?
they
You can-
and they have built, like especially Founder's Row, has built like a street against what I would think is the better pedestrian experience. Like there's so like I would like to require them to use the areas that are within the facility or on West Street. Or,
Right,
not
like
on West
Founders
Street.
too, is the garage is built to include drop-off
There's
spaces.
drop-off spots.
Yeah.
So I think that's the part, like either seeing that was in planning commission
So,
in our
yeah.
purview at all to like create more fines or like I know that like Mr. Stevens was saying Mr. Krasner was saying like it's an enforcement question, but also like can we make enforcement worth it to go do because there's value in it or find the building anyway.
But is it a site plan review? You know, after a year, do we ever go back and say, here's what we had in mind and here's how it's working?
I
Not
would love to do that.
just for one question like that, but just generally speaking, you know, did the trees live? Did the, you know, storefronts open to the public like they're supposed to be? Because sometimes, you know, a new business will come in and cover up the windows, which is not what we had in mind. I don't know. I mean, it's occurred to me a few other times that we should have in the same way that the cottage ordinance has a built-in, look back after a certain period of time, which we, are trying to get back to. But do we ever do that with the bigger projects especially?
I think it's a matter of resources and,
Yeah, I mean, what kind of load does that put on you guys?
Also, have any site plans come through post, has the change official, because it's not, we haven't actually done the final public hearing thing, but like, has anything come through to you? How's that worked? How's that gone?
I think the Madison Homes will be the first true case. Everything else generally started. I think you all had a chance to weigh in. So I think this winter, depending on when they want to file, I think will be a good pilot. And again, we'll do our best. We'll check as many boxes as we can. I'm less concerned about the 40-day window. It's kind of artificial and manufactured. It doesn't mean much. It's simply a slightly different label for an existing process that's still going to have to take place. So if we're done, we're done. If not, additional rounds will be needed. We're not going to approve something just because 40 days have come up, so.
Yeah.
Great. Back to Stratford, real quick. Mr. Krasner was correct that there was a bike rack, a proposed double-sided bike rack in that location where they're planning to do the loading. So I'm curious where they're relocating the bike rack. I think one of the things I liked about that bike rack was that it was on like a nice prominent corner near the entrance. Often bike racks are relegated to the rear of the parking lot where maybe they have a few extra spaces near the dumpsters. So I wouldn't want that bike rack to be downgraded to a worse position on the site. So if you could maybe find out where it's moving,
We can check on that.
be good to know. And it was for 12 bikes. That's what was on the site plan. So that's what I'd like to see. All right. Any other questions, comments? Great. Well, thank you all. Appreciate it. Sorry we didn't hit your 9:15 estimate, Jack. But, yeah.
No
Good
correspondence?
discussion.
I didn't see that one
Sorry,
coming.
yeah. We don't have any correspondence, right? We heard correspondence. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. We're adjourned.